was living one big lie. She fucking hates me. Trust, she fucking hates me. Love, 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 love. I tried too hard and she told my feelings.
My Super Ex-Girlfriend is a 2006 superhero sex comedy based on the premise of an ordinary guy dating a superhero. It's also sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, was marketed on the premise that men suffering domestic abuse is funny, and is just plain bad. A lot of people consider it one of the worst films ever. I personally have seen a lot worse, but it's up there. Considering that it's a mainstream film released by a major studio and not some substandard production that film nerds specifically dug up to heckle, like Mono's The Hands of Fate or Troll 2, it's not surprising that a lot of people consider it one of the worst. The Alliance of Women Film Journalists gave it a special mention for their 2006 Hall of Shame Award. While I consider the film to be specifically about a man dating a superhero, the film is sold based around a joke that comes up in the second act, where after he dumps the superhero, she responds with violent revenge. She stalks and harasses him and the woman that he tries to romance, while he can't admit to having dated a superhero, and her forms of revenge are outrageous, like throwing a shark at him and stuff. This is supposed to be good, clean humor, and not at all messed up. It's based around the conceptualization of men as inherently strong and women as inherently weak, so men abusing women is seen as a horrible crime, while women performing the same acts of abuse are seen as fundamentally ineffectual, regardless of any actual suffering. The 2001 film Rat Race has a similar scene where a helicopter pilot catches her boyfriend cheating on her, and then humorously harasses the boyfriend and the mistress with her powerful helicopter. Even when the woman is very clearly shown to have the power, this power is framed as humorous outrageousness, and the abuse is dismissed.
I think we just killed him!
You can't kill him! He's like a cockroach!
This sexist double standard has very real consequences, where men and lesbians are less likely to report domestic abuse, because they are unlikely to be believed. Repeating this lie that men cannot be abused, and women cannot be abusers, is not only bad writing, it is demonstratively harmful.
It is a big problem in this country. Men create more damage, but women hit more than men do.
However, this is only one part of the larger garbage fire that is this movie. Though it is called My Super Ex-Girlfriend, it would be more aptly called My Super Girlfriend, as it is about all of the stages of dating and then breaking up with a female superhero. It is a satire of the superhero genre that takes a route of being a crude sex comedy, and I imagine this would have been seen as bizarre to audiences of 2006, and was part of the reason that it got such a bad reception overall. 10 years later, Deadpool proved that it can be done well, and even as moderately feminist. This leads me to think that in better hands and with more care, even My Super Ex-Girlfriend could have been a good movie. What we got, however, was sexist trash. I believe the biggest problem lies with screenwriter Don Payne, a former Simpsons writer who would go on to co-write serious superhero movies Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Thor. I think it's safe to say that he was a superhero fan who came at the satire from a place of love, if not the talent to render it. Silver Surfer is widely considered a crappy superhero movie, from the era before studios cared about the genre, while the reasonably successful Thor underwent massive restructuring, and owes its feminist quality to uncredited contributions from Guardians of the Galaxy co-writer Nicole Perlman. If My Super Ex-Girlfriend is anything to go on, I think it's reasonable to conclude that Thor succeeded in spite of Don Payne's involvement, and not because of it. According to an interview he did with Moviephone, he conceived of the film as a romantic comedy, and sold the script as Super X. This indicates that he is primarily responsible for the problematic portrayal of domestic abuse and other problems with the plot. The film was handed over to prolific comedy director Ivan Reitman, who was behind such high-quality films as the original Ghostbusters and Kindergarten Cop. If he was truly allowed to sculpt the production into something that met his satisfaction, I think he could have transformed even a script as bad as this into a decent movie. However, Regency Enterprises and/or Fox didn't want to take time on it. They wanted a fast production and a fast payout. So they shot the thing in 4 weeks, focused on saturating the market with a shark scene, and successfully made more than twice their money back. And that is how we ended up with the sexist piece of crap that is My Super Ex-Girlfriend. The film displays a lot of the common ideas held by the loosely organized misogynist communities, recognizable on the internet under such names as men's rights activists, masculinists, meninists, or red pillars. Their beliefs, while generally misogynistic, are rather varied and hard to codify. The ideas in the film relevant to their philosophies include the understanding that men are fundamentally strong, women are fundamentally weak, that it is both natural and good for men to take a dominant role in relations with women, that the feminist women who mess with that natural order are misguided at best and dangerous at worst, that the concepts of sexual harassment and women abusing men are false ideas put forward by feminism in order to challenge the goodly natural order where men dominate women, that good women are comfortable in a submissive role, that friendship with women is just a prelude to sex, and that men constantly compete with each other for dominance, as is measured by the ability to have sex with attractive women. This system of dominance is based around the conception of male personality types deemed alpha and beta, where the alpha male displays sufficient dominance traits and is able to have a lot of sex, while the beta male is not submissive, insufficiently dominant. These organized misogynists largely believe themselves to be beta males who are trying to band together to become alphas, either through making existing alphas irrelevant in questionably applied sociology, or through teaching themselves to abuse women and men that they deem betas, as they believe natural alphas do. This should go without saying, but just to be clear, there are no alphas and betas. That is a total misunderstanding of what human hierarchies look like. It's not even accurate to the wolf packs where the terms originate. In the wild, wolf packs are just big families, with more equality than what we have in our families. The idea of alpha and beta wolves comes from a misunderstanding that wolves in captivity would behave like wolves in the wild. When you grab a bunch of individual wolves from different packs and shove them in a space together, hierarchies form in the same sort of way that hierarchies form in prison. It doesn't mean that it's inherent to how wolf packs operate and representative of what they do when they have a choice. This misunderstanding about wolves is then misused to try to reveal something about how human hierarchies form, which is pretty much just because it happens to line up with the existing ideology. Humans wouldn't use wolves as role models for anything else. It is a human's natural place to hunt deer in the nude, to rip out their throats with our teeth. The wolves do it! The alpha-beta male idea is born of deeply held misogyny and old racist ideas about passively dominant white men needing to defend submissive white women from brutish black men. That racist dynamic turned into porn, and that fueled racist white misogynist insecurity. They view women as prizes to be won and condemn the more dominant men, who they see as inherently abusive, and they try to take them out of power so that they can have the women from the position of the dominant alpha male. It is a supremely messed up view of the world, and I suspect that Don Payne was sympathetic to it. The whole film feels like one of their fantasies. The film was set in New York City, and what is probably a nod to Metropolis of the Superman comics, and of course a lot of the Marvel comics are set there, including Fantastic Four. The plot starts when a bunch of crooks rob a place and run, but their getaway car is apprehended by the local superhero in what might be an allusion to Action Comics #1. Yeah, Sharknado does it better. She is G-Girl, played by Uma Thurman, of Batman and Robin fame. We never find out what the G stands for, and a deleted scene indicates that there is no meaning to it, but a character named Vaughn speculates that it means G-spot, and that defines the character for the audience. There is a strong sexual theme in the film, and G-Girl gets hit with a lot of sexual objectification, as she more or less exists to turn on the male audience, when she's not hilariously abusive. Even as she performs her main function as a superhero, she is outlandishly provocative with her skirt flying up and showing her panties, her outfit getting more revealing as she shields bystanders from bullets, which fall to bring attention to her heels. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say she looks like a porn star, albeit curtailed for the PG-13 rating. I think it's reasonable to imagine Don Payne intended it to be an R rating anyway. Notably, the gun-toting crook endangering the public is one of the few black characters in the film. The man was likely cast for that role because of a racist association between black men and violence. Him spraying bullets while the white G-Girl defends the public creates a common white supremacist image. It's kind of an anti-Luke Cage. The adoring public chants her name as if she weren't some weird, over-sexualized spectacle. And with that surreal moment, we time-skip to the next day, with the foiled robbery being read about by two male friends. Our protagonist, Matt, played by Luke Wilson, and Vaughn, played by Rainn Wilson. No relation that I can see. Even for this movie's standards, Vaughn is preoccupied by sex. Matt asks him what superpower he would want to have, and Vaughn answers, the ability to orally pleasure himself. I've occasionally heard guys discuss this as an ultimate form of masturbation that only a few gifted people have the flexibility to achieve. It's notably present as a recurring gag in Kevin Smith's Clerks. Clerks poked fun at it as an idea that a lot of guys are into, even though it's laughably outlandish. My Super Ex-Girlfriend uses it as a way to establish that Vaughn is really sexual, and then turns it around to shame him for sounding gay, with Matt taking a role as a more sufficiently masculine alpha male, dominating a beta male for failing to live up to a hetero ideal. You know, when Deadpool accidentally makes a gay-sounding comment, he pauses awkwardly for a moment, but then he just runs with it because he is actually into guys. My Super Ex-Girlfriend is blatantly homophobic, right off the bat, and in a way that's absurd. Masturbation isn't about sexual attraction to yourself. It's offensive and just plain stupid.
This is something I long ago came to peace with in my role as the beta male.
Vaughn notices G-Girl and her secret identity of Jenny Johnson, just minding her own business on the subway, and he uses porn stereotypes to describe her as sexually attractive, and tells Matt to ask her out. Matt is resistant because his last breakup resulted in the same sort of downplayed domestic violence that this movie was marketed on being a joke, which is foreshadowing to the fundamental joke of the movie, and an indication that Don Payne just didn't think that women abusing men was at all horrifying, for him to just throw it in so casually. Vaughn tells him to get over it, and Matt goes over to ask her out. Now, it's commonly considered a form of harassment for guys to flirt with women on public transportation, especially when the women are actively engrossed in something. It's a neutral territory, and by guys asserting themselves at women within it, it makes the area dominated by them, making women feel unsafe. Public transportation is highly necessary for functioning as a wage-earning adult, so these spaces need to remain safe for women to use them. There are all sorts of social protocols put in place to keep women from feeling unsafe in this environment. My Super Ex-Girlfriend just steamrolls over them to portray Matt as a moderately effective dominant male. He talks to her even though she's busy on her phone, even though she glares at him, and asks her out. She flat out rejects him, but he persists, with Vaughn encouraging him. This is creepy, entitled behavior. If you're gonna make your film about sex, you need to have an understanding of consent. Deadpool understands that line and uses it very effectively to make the protagonist attractive both as a boyfriend engaging in consensual sex, and as a mercenary delivering a rape threat. My Super Ex-Girlfriend has no idea where that line is, and it just ends up creepy. A random purse snatcher happens to rob her, and Matt takes off after him. A car spooks the crook and he drops the bag. The guy is skittish and willing to just run away, but Matt pulls out the old cliche of, "Yeah, you better run," which offends the guy and makes him run after Matt with a pipe to bludgeon him. This has the makings of a decent joke, but it depends on the crook having a really inconsistent character. He's willing to commit an obvious theft in full view of a lot of people, but he's scared by a car and willing to run away, but then he turns into a violent brute ready to bash in a man with a pipe in broad daylight over some stupid insults. What is this character? A glitching NPC? I used to be a superhero too, until I took a gold kryptonite arrow to the knee. Jenny dispatches the crook, while Matt cowers in a dumpster. Jenny is grateful for Matt's show of manly chivalry, and now wants to go out with him. Not just on a little date, but a big formal date. It's just so awkward. It's clearly fulfilling some male fantasy about performing a big manly stunt and winning the chance to date a woman. I could understand her appreciating his action and growing to like him as they chat, but she just immediately launches into wanting to date him like he completed some manly trial proving his worth as an alpha male.
You are the alpha.
Which represents a common sexist idea that conceptualizes men dating women as a video game where the right series of actions produces favorable results, as they score points and prove their ability. Jenny refuses to give out her number because of privacy concerns, but asks for his number. He worries that she's just trying to blow him off, like he's a beta male without the ability to win women, and she insists that she deals with men who don't impress her in a different way, which is indicated to be superhero violence, foreshadowing to the big problematic joke. At the heart of the phone concern, however, is the idea of control over the date. The 2001 romantic comedy Kate and Leopold discusses how the male partner can fulfill the traditional masculine role of seducer by controlling the manner in which the phone call to make a date is performed, to keep power over the exchange.
The point is to keep the ball in your court.
And this fight for dominance is very present in the subtext here. He wants to keep control over the date by having the ability to call her himself, and her wanting that control is portrayed as a negative female trait, indicative of her being an insane ex-girlfriend in the making. It's very assertive of the idea that men should be in control of relationships, and that any indication that the woman wants to take control is a sign of something very wrong. As they walk away, we see that she hung the crook off the edge of the fire escape, his feet dangling. So he's not gonna survive that. He's either gonna fall or get tired, relax, and then die when the blood sinks down his legs and away from his brain. It's essentially a murder, and it's just played off as, she's a superhero. Matt and Vaughn go to their job at an architecture firm, where we see that Matt is interested in a coworker named Hannah, even covertly checking her out. Now, Hannah is the movie's real love interest because Matt and Jenny won't make it, and we do know going in that Jenny becomes an ex-girlfriend, but in context it makes no sense for Matt to be so into Hannah when he just agreed to make a date with Jenny. It just makes him look even more like a big creep. Hannah is currently in a relationship with a buff underwear model named Steve, the alpha male for Matt to compete with for dominance. The movie makes a point about Matt feeling intimidated by Steve's traditional masculine attractiveness when Matt doesn't have the same abdomen. We don't know what abdomen he does have, though. There's a weird discretion shot, like Luke Wilson threatened to sue if the director made him look unattractive or something. Maybe it's just bad editing, I don't know. Their boss, Carla, played by Wanda Sykes, catches Matt ogling Hannah and confronts him about it, asking Hannah if she wants to file a complaint. That is totally reasonable, but she's portrayed like she's an out-of-touch feminist just causing trouble and making him embarrassed for no good reason. Hannah is flattered and good-natured about it right off the bat, which is unrealistic to take as a default. It's not impossible, but it would require some specific character traits, where she is shown to be confident and appreciative of her sex appeal, such as may be seen with sex worker characters like Vanessa in Deadpool. Without that deliberate characterization, it is weird for a woman in a relationship to be delighted to find out that a male coworker who knows she's in a relationship was ogling her in the workplace without her consent. By default, it would make things awkward and raise the concern of an unsafe work environment, thereby making Carla's suggestion perfectly relevant, and not something to be dismissed as overly controlling feminism. Already we have seen great male entitlement, and we're not even through the first 10 minutes. Jenny calls Matt and makes a dinner date at an Indian place. And Hannah is thrilled that Matt could get a date, cheering him on. She fulfills a male entitlement fantasy of a hot coworker, fine with being ogled, who will praise your dating success, and is ultimately just being babysat until she breaks up with her boyfriend. Now, cue the racist musical phrase to signal Indian cuisine. Yeah, that's right up there with the Chinese gong. They have a really awkward conversation with a forced joke about her rambling about sex. I think it's supposed to be sexy, but it's really just awkward and you want them to stop talking and move on to the next scene. It's soon followed by a really awkward superhero joke, where she runs off to save people from a fire and comes back with soot on her face. The whole two places at once dual identity joke is so cliched that you'd think they could pull it off, at least decently. But they put no effort into it, and it comes off as so painful and tired, and next scene already. The next day at work, finally, he talks to Hannah and helps her with her computer in a really contrived scene to put him in a position for her to casually kick him in the backside. He jokingly warns her that sexual harassment is a two-way street, which delegitimizes both workplace sexual harassment and the idea that it is a two-way street. Don Payne, of course, had a vested interest in no one taking women abusing men seriously, in order to keep the film's big joke unobjectionable. Then Steve comes in to challenge Matt for dominance and getting to be with Hannah.
Hello, Alpha.
And insults him by saying that Matt would never be a threat, thereby characterizing him as a beta male.
Beta?
Hannah doesn't notice any of this, and just lavishes adoration on Steve, while Carla criticizes their clearly consensual kiss because she's such an out-of-touch feminist who thinks that everything is harassment. Hannah characterizes Steve as the right guy for her, and says that Matt will find someone like that, and Matt jokingly takes her literally that he is looking for a guy. Given his previous shaming of Vaughn for sounding gay, it solidifies this movie as homophobic. The idea of gay people even existing is supposed to be funny, so him alluding to being into guys is supposed to be absurd. This is another thing that Deadpool does better. He makes amusing comments that reference being into guys, while actually being into guys, and totally respected as a bisexual protagonist. Their conversation ends with Hannah warning Matt away from dating Jenny, even though her perception of her is entirely based on him being confused over the two places at once joke. Apparently that's enough for Hannah to know that Jenny is an insane ex-girlfriend in the making. It's terrible writing, and it comes off as sexism with the good, submissive woman, knowing that the more dominant woman is bad, reflecting the Madonna-whore dichotomy. Vaughn then gives him the bad advice to pursue Jenny because he thinks that her warning signs, which again shouldn't be validated by the narrative as actual warning signs, given that the audience knows about the deception, are actually signs that she would be really into sex. Even though Vaughn is portrayed as humorously off base because he's too horny for his own good, he's validated by the narrative because he's right and Jenny is really interested in sex. We know this because of her ramblings about sex and the awkward dinner scene. This whole show of Matt ignoring warning signs is totally pointless.
Great Muppety Odin, I missed that sex.
So Matt goes on another date with Jenny. They start to make out, but she criticizes his kissing skills in a moment that shames his insufficient masculinity, and then she moves to seduce him instead, being what is to be taken as alarmingly dominant. She refuses to let him achieve natural masculine dominance, and reveals a dangerous trait where she rejects the natural feminine submissiveness, and instead moves to dominate the man. Then, this leads to a rape scene. It's not supposed to be a rape scene, it's supposed to be a sex scene that continues the theme of humiliating the man for insufficient masculinity, and being unable to dominate the woman, and instead her dominating him. But the movie accomplishes this through rape. She has super strength and hurts him. It stops being fun for him, and he makes sounds of discomfort, and literally says to stop, but she ignores that and continues. That is straightforward rape. The male screenwriter and director did not see it that way. I'm sure their adherence to traditional gender roles of men as inherently strong and women as inherently weak kept them from seeing that men can be victims, women can be abusers, and women can rape men. Ivan Reitman even did this before in Ghostbusters with a positive portrayal of ghosts raping men. The 2005 film Wedding Crashers has a very similar joke about a sexually dominant woman repeatedly raping a man, and it just being played off as an unlucky schlemazel type humor. An old blog post I made about the Wedding Crashers problem got a comment from an anti-feminist rolling his eyes about feminists thinking that men can be raped, when we all know that men always want sex. Yeah. The ultimate irony of the sexist philosophy honoring men is that it ends up with the most vulnerable men being disrespected by not allowing their recognition as victims. It leads to demeaning jokes about them being humiliated for having insufficient masculinity. A generally interesting aspect is that the sex scene involves her slamming the bed around and ultimately breaking it. Afterwards, Matt brags to Vaughn about Jenny's sexual prowess by saying that she broke the bed. This is similar to the sex scene in 2011's The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1, where Edward breaks the bed with his vampire strength. As the whole of Twilight is popularly viewed through a misogynistic lens, this bed-breaking is often regarded with derision as an absurd female fantasy. Well, apparently men fantasize about it too.
She broke his bed.
During the date, they are spied on by a supervillain named Professor Bedlam, played by Eddie Izzard, essentially a Lex Luthor sort of character. Considering that Eddie Izzard is bigender and commonly cross-dresses, having him on the show without him challenging gender roles at all is a missed opportunity.
I am a transgender guy, did come out 31 years ago.
He picks Matt off the street and interrogates him about Jenny's personality. He refuses to talk, so Bedlam hangs him by his foot off of the Statue of Liberty as a way to bait G-Girl out of her apartment, so that he can steal some of her hair. This is a reference to Superman 4, where Lex Luthor steals one of Superman's hairs and uses it to create Nuclear Man. That's almost as stupid as this movie.
She fucking hates me. Just she fucking hates me.